The PlayStation 2 console during its launch of 2001 didn't have the biggest selection of games available during its launch period, but after a few months a few titles would start to be seen within store shelves, ranging from different types of genres, from racing games to puzzle games, fighting games and so forth. But one of the first survival horror entries to be released on the system would go under the name of Extermination, created by a development team known as Deep Space, and was composed of a few developers that originally worked with Capcom under the original Resident Evil games back during the PS1 era. And you can see a lot of similarities in terms of the overall gameplay and aesthetics, in terms of the puzzle solving and use of weapons and so forth. It definitely takes much inspiration from those previous games. So the game follows the plot of a US Marine recon team with primarily the main character called Dennis Riley, as you infiltrate a facility after getting a distress call based off of certain events that have happened within a secret laboratory facility. But upon arrival, it's quickly shown that all is not well, as the facility has been overrun with all sorts of viral monsters that you have to dispatch in order to avoid infection, as infection from this virus can quickly turn you into a hideous monster. So it is up to Dennis to find out the whole reason behind the events of the facility, but also to put a stop to the spread of the infection, to stop it from spreading into the outside world, because if it did, it would be devastating for the planet. So during gameplay, the character will have to explore different areas of the facility, not only dispatching enemies, but also trying to solve puzzles, finding key cards to unlock different doors, using different switches to unlock other areas. There's a lot of throwback to previous survival horror games. The game really does focus more so on exploration and puzzle solving in order to get from point A to point B to progress through the story. And Dennis comes equipped with an upgradable assault rifle, which you can add different attachments to, from anything from the likes of grenade launchers to flamethrowers that you'll get as you progress through the game at different points. And you can also unlock additional hidden areas by utilising a battery pack that Dennis has with him, but you'll need to recharge it at different intervals and different recharge points that you'll find throughout the game. And the same can be said for the ammunition pickups. Primarily the ammo drops are rare enough in the game, but you can also utilise unlimited ammo refills at the various ammo stations that you'll find in different sections of the game. But where Extermination remains different from a lot of other survival horror games is its use of an infection rate system, that once you interact with enemies, if you take damage, there's a high possibility that you will get infected with the virus, and you will have a counter on your health bar to let you know of the rate of the infection. So gradually over time it starts to increase, but the more damage that you do take, the quicker that infection will increase. So you will have to quickly find and explore the areas to find various vaccines that you can use, but you'll also have to look out for various vaccine points that can literally remove the infection entirely. But again, once you go out and you start taking more damage, the infection rate will also spread. But if you let the infection rate hit to like a certain point, what happens is that your health decreases, and you can end up taking a lot more damage from a load of environmental hazards than you would have done before. So you have to be not only mindful of your surroundings in terms of enemies and taking them out, but you also have to be mindful of the infection rate at which the infection is actually spreading. So you have to make sure that it doesn't reach 100% at any point, because if you do, it's pretty much game over. So as you progress through the game, you'll find out more about the different enemies, the different types. You'll be able to pick up loads of notes and dialogue and articles that will teach you more about the plot and the story of the game and what ended up happening within the laboratory experiments that led to the disaster. And you will also have to fight many different types of mutated monsters along the way, even more stronger monsters the further into the game you get. But there are many elements in the game that showcase a throwback to previous survival horror games on the PS1 era. Although this was the first survival horror game to be released on the PS2, it isn't the most refined in terms of its gameplay dynamics and control systems, as even though the game was quite hyped up during its early stages before the game was released, it did receive mixed reviews, and The game was praised for a lot of its originality to the genre, adding in new features that you hadn't seen in previous games, but the game was heavily criticised due to its awkward controls and gameplay systems. And one of the most notable things is, depending on the region of the game that you had at the time, if you're in the European region or the North American region, the game had different dialogue and voice overs for the characters. But even with some of the character models, even your own character model that you play as Dennis looks completely different from he does from another region. In the PAL region, which I would have played because I'm living in Ireland, Dennis had short spiky hair, but in the North American he has much longer hair. So there are a number of differences depending on which version you have access to. But one of the major issues with the game is down to its clunky controls and very twitchy control system. I myself personally have witnessed this, as when I first got my PlayStation 2 back in late 2001, I'd originally bought the PS2 just to get Grand Theft Auto 3. I wasn't really interested in any other games. But at the time, one of my mates had brought down a few games that he had, because he wasn't long after getting the PS2 also. And what ended up happening was he ended up having Extermination as one of his first games, and he gave me a loan of it for a little while. Now, I played it and I enjoyed it, and I thought it was really good for what was on offer. And the fact is that I'm a huge fan of Resident Evil and anything survival horror related. I was intrigued and also interested to try the game out and see what it was about. And now I finished it and I played it through a few times and unlocked a lot of the hidden elements and features within the game. But one of the most frustrating parts that I can agree with, that everybody else had the same issue with, was the controls. The controls are very, very twitchy and very clunky, because there are certain elements where you have to run and jump and climb on different areas, and sometimes it doesn't react the way you'd like it to. Or sometimes when you have to move across like narrow kind of like pipes or lines to get from one point to another, and because of the twitchy controls, and the controls always kind of almost set, you always have to keep aiming your gun or going into the first person mode by pressing the R2 button to be able to reset the camera somewhat, so you can actually position yourself in a way that you can move across. And you have to keep doing that every couple of seconds so that you don't fall off, because if not, you'll fall off the edge and you'll end up going back to where you were previously, or falling off a gap that you'll die altogether, which means you'll have to keep restarting or keep trying to get past that part over and over again, which will literally drive you crazy. That was one of the major elements that I had with the game back in the day. I did enjoy it, but that was the controls for me was what really did hamper the experience. It was quite clunky, but it was too fiddly and too fidgety, and it just wasn't as refined compared to controls of characters and other survival horror games that I played over the years. But aside from that, the game did have a lot of really cool ideas and features. There was a lot of cool ideas with regards to the story, as it took a lot of references from not just Resident Evil, but it took references from a lot of big movies from back in the 80s, such as The Thing, and even took a lot of comparisons from another survival horror game that was originally released on the Sega Dreamcast known as Carrier. So there's a lot of elements in Extermination that takes emphasis from many of those popular games and movies of the time. Aside from the clunky controls, do I recommend playing it? If you're into survival horror, I do recommend giving it a try. It is actually a really good game. It's just the controls are really just the major issue with it. But if you can look past that and have a bit of patience with it, you'll have a really good experience. And the funny thing is, Extermination is quite often overlooked within the survival horror space. A lot of people, even to this day, still don't really know that it even exists, and many people kind of just didn't even look at it overall when the PlayStation was released. So it is somewhat of a forgotten classic, if you will. But if you are genuinely into survival horror games, it is another one on your list you should check off, just to experience the story alone and to see what's on offer. Because if you like exploration elements and you like backtracking to solve puzzles and to find key cards, you'll definitely have no problem with that. You'll have that in abundance with this game, so you will have fun with it if that's something you're into. And I would love to know your thoughts on Extermination for the PlayStation 2 if you have played it yourself. What experiences do you have to share with the game? Did you manage to play the game when it was first released during the early days of the PS2, or did you manage to play it later? And if so, what did you think of the game overall? I'd love to hear whatever experience you have of the game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of survival horror games similar to Extermination released on the PS2, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated when videos are released. And in the meantime, if you would like to check out more content on the channel similar to Extermination and other survival horror games, you can check out the playlist here on screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.